and welcome to our webinar, Marriage Accompaniment, Why is Post-Marriage Couples Formation Important? This is the first part of our three-part marriage webinar series with Dr. Stephen Serafin. And I'm Jonathan Sitko, Director of Programs at the Catholic Apostolate Center, and I'm helping out with some of the facilitation as well as any sort of technical questions you might have. We are pleased to have Dr. Stephen Serafin with us today. He is currently the Pastoral Associate of St. Bartholomew's in Scotch Plains, New Jersey, where he leads an initiative called the Emmaus Coalition of Lifelong Formation. He is the creator of Endure, Marriage Enrichment Initiative through Faith and Family Life Catholic Ministries. He graduated from Catholic University with a doctorate in ministry in 2022. He has received an MA in Theology with a focus on Evangelization and Catechesis from the University of Notre Dame's ECHO program, and a BA from Catholic University with a minor in Finance and Management. He has served in a number of ministerial positions: Associate Director for Catechesis for the Archdiocese of Newark, Director of Faith Formation, Campus Minister, and Teacher. His career is focused on accompanying the next generation of Newlyweds, a parish model for perfecting the love of marriage through a peer collaborative dialogue. As I said in the beginning, this is the first in a three-part series. And so there will be opportunities for registration throughout this webinar for the next two. And there will also be time at the end of this for question and answer. So please use the chat or the questions tab so that Stephen and I, towards the end, can have a dialogue about some of the pertinent questions that you have. If you have any technical issues during this presentation, please send a message in the chat box, and I will try my best to help you out. And now I will turn things over to Stephen.
Thanks, John. I'm excited to be here. So for over the last 6 years, I've been doing my research. I've been working towards developing my treatise for the doctorate, but then now it's been published into an actual program called Endure, which we'll talk about throughout the series. But this is something that's been really important to me. And my wife and I, we just celebrated our 8-year anniversary this past weekend. And this is the picture of us. And I always find this picture fascinating because I think it's a great picture, but it has this exit sign at the top. And I didn't realize how beneficial this picture was going to become, because I use it every time I talk about marriage now, because the reality that we face today is that those people who are coming to us, to our faith communities, we see them, we accompany them, and however we accompany them in pre-Cana, and then they hit that exit sign, and for the most of them, we do not see them ever again. When it comes to accompanying the couples and marriages, the church has been talking about this for decades. We see the importance of marriage. We talk about the importance of marriage. We talk about, since Vatican II, this importance of ongoing accompaniment of married couples. And I think each of us know how important it is who've been married, or if you have a family. One of the things I always start with, and you can't interact with this, but just think about it. When you first got married, did you know everything? When you first started having kids, did everything just did you figure it out right away? And the answer to that is no, right? No one knew what they were doing when this all started, but you just dive into it. And hopefully you have a support system somewhere that you can turn to learn, find mentorship. But what we're finding is that a lot of places, people just don't have that. And I think the most important thing we could be doing as a church right now is engaging in this area of life. So marriage enrichment, especially young family accompaniment. There's probably about 3 key times when marriage enrichment is super crucial. It's crucial throughout, but the 3 key times is in that first 5 years, right around when your kids are entering into college, and you're about 17 to 25 years married. And then finally it's at retirement. And so throughout, we'll be adjusting all of those different things. But what I have found, and with the hundreds of couples I've now worked with, I find that love does endure all things, but it just takes a little bit of help. And so I want to use that passage from Corinthians as our opening prayer for today. I find that this has sort of been the crux to all of the marriage ministry that I've done, because this is the roadmap that St. Paul gives us. And then Francis uses this roadmap as a reflection within Amoris Laetitia, that Joy of Love document that came out in 2015. And so just together, I just want you to reflectively listen to these words and listen to what is St. Paul expressing, and how do we live out this love and receive love. So in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Love is patient Love is kind. It is not jealous. Love is not pompous. It is not inflated. It is not rude. It does not seek its own interest. It is not quick-tempered. It does not brood over injury. It does not rejoice over wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. Over these next 3 months, we're going to unpack this whole concept of marriage accompaniment. This first one is really going to give a 10,000-foot view of where we're going, why we need to go there. As I said, I don't think this is going to be anything shocking to anybody. I think we all know we need to go there. I think this webinar is meant to talk about that we actually just have to start making time and resources to do that. I think we all have different hats that we wear in parish life, diocesan life, and we can be caught in those systems. But I have found that the most fruit I have seen in my ministry in the 15 years I've been doing different types of ministry, working with couples in this way, working with connecting couples to one another to create intentional community, has created so much, such a deeper connected parish life. And so we'll share some of that. So that'll be this first one. We'll talk about this like 10,000-foot view. June 10th, I will talk more about sort of the strategies that I have used. And so I created this program called Endure through Faith and Family Life Catholic Ministries. I will actually be coming on as their executive director on July 1st to focus heavily on this idea of how do we create a catechumenal process for marriage. So looking at pre-Cana, but even before that, in how we're forming people in vocation and discernment, all the way to this idea of pre-Cana preparation and then ongoing marriage enrichment. For that webinar, I have a friend of mine who I've been working with who's experienced the Endure program from the Archdiocese of Hartford. She'll be hopping on to have a little dialogue with us. And then July 18th, we're going to talk more about tips and best practices and different things that we've seen come from this type of ministry. What are the success stories? What are some of the fruits that we've actually been able to tangibly work with? And then I have a couple that will be joining me for that, who's also been through the Endure program and then also has run it now themselves out from California. And so before we dive into all of this, the 10,000-foot view, I think it's important to realize like who's our audience, right? And so being in church ministry and walking with families, so St. Bartholomew's has about 3,000 families. We have about 650 of them in our faith formation program. The one thing that I did this year is try to meet with them just to have conversations and learn from them. And what I have found is that I think there's a lot of assumptions we put onto them. I think they really want to be here. They want to get involved and connected, but they can sometimes be lost. And so a lot of Endure is built on the road to Emmaus. And so we need to understand sort of where they are on the road before we can actually start doing the accompaniment and then pulling them back into the parish community more effectively. So I got a little funny video that's going to help us enter into all of this.
I mean, do we really want to give up our Saturday mornings?
Maybe we'll just find a team that can practice and play on the same day, whatever.
Let's not alter our life to accommodate youth sports.
They are so cute.
Wait, is he good?
I mean, all parents must say this, but I think he may be good.
My judgment isn't clouded at all by the fact that he's my son.
He's way too good for this rec league.
There's traveling teams you can try out for.
Tryouts at this age.
Yeah, and this message board says if he doesn't try out now, there's no way he'll ever break in.
We have failed as parents. We are behind.
We need to drop everything.
We need to map out our child's entire future. My self-worth is directly tied to my child's success. Here's a team schedule. Whoa. It looks like tournaments every weekend for the next 3 months.
And practices every night?
And the coach recommends private lessons if you have time.
What is that, like a guy coming over and saying, kick the ball?
And that's going to help?
All that training may not work, but it is expensive.
The more expensive it is, the more pressure we'll put on our kids.
That's a formula for success.
Pay the team fee, buy the uniform.
Let's cash out all our vacation time and do this.
Wait, should we ask our kid if he actually wants to do this?
Oh, yeah.
So that they're trying to be satirical and then try to joke on like what families are going through right now, but I don't think it's that far off, right? I don't think it's that far what parents are experiencing on an everyday basis, right? So in the what I find about marriage accompaniment and how we approach formation right now, the majority of our resources and money is dedicated to first grade through 8th grade formation, or whenever confirmation is. You might even push that into high school, but the majority of our money, our time, our energy is focused on first through confirmation. Then we try to plug the holes. We do baptism formation. We try to do some adult formation. And I think the church is moving in this direction. And I think there's more and more resources that are saying it, that we really have to begin accompanying families when families start. And that's not even when they have their first kid. It's when marriage forms. We find all the data shows is that those first 5 years of marriage is crucial of building skills and learning practical ways to live this new union that you've put together. And we just don't naturally have that, right? And so what we've seen in the data is that around 40 to 50% of marriages will fail. And most of them have come from this. So couples that we're working with and we're accompanying might not have a witness of what a good, healthy marriage should look like. And so let me dive in and show you sort of where these thoughts have come from and why I think it's so crucial that we begin this now. One of the first statistics that really jumped out to me that said that this is a need. And so there was the National Study for Youth and Religion that came out, started in 2001. It finished in 2013. The two books that sort of the book ended on it, there's 4 books that came out, but the 2 books, the first one was Soul Searching. The last one was this Back Pocket God. And this was by Christian Smith from Notre Dame. And I think this was the most alarming information when I was working in the Archdiocese of Newark at the time. And this is what inspired me to get back into parish life, try to figure out like, how can we close this gap, these gaps in formation that we have? Because only in this study, this 10-year period, which was basically my generation that they studied, only 2.5% of those people who they surveyed throughout those 10 years remained actively weekly practicing Catholics. Right. And so that was for every 10 people that were, for every one person that we were getting, 10 people from my generation were leaving. And in all the surveys that were coming out within this data, they kept finding that they didn't find a home within these parish communities. There was no connection. And you just think of the structures that we have right now, right? We put people through that 1st through 8th grade formation. We accompany to a first communion. We accompany to confirmation. If they come back, we accompany to marriage. But when they're actually doing the most difficult work, which merging 2 people's lives together, trying to figure out how you balance family lives together, finances, then eventually when they have kids and trying to figure out how do you balance work-life balance and being present and those sleepless nights, the church isn't actively seeking them. They're there, they're saying, okay, we're here if you need us, but they don't know to come. They don't know how to engage with us. And then the most important thing that I find is that they feel alone. They feel like they're only ones that aren't getting this right. And the reality is they're not. Everybody's feeling the same way. Some of this information comes from 2 other great marriage programs that are out there right now. So the top comes from Communio. They did a study with Barna back in, I think it was like 2016. And they found that the majority of parishes in the country, at least the ones that they were surveying, had no substantial marriage ministry. Right? There was nothing to ask for these couples to have ongoing formation after they got married. And then the bottom one is from Witness to Love. They found that if you looked at the divorce rate over 5 years, there was this 23% divorce rate for those who actually went through pre-Cana and a 25% who didn't. So there wasn't that big of a difference. More research as they've come in and they started to get them connected to mentors and community and making more of that initial preparation, an accompaniment process. Those divorce rates have now dropped to almost 6% in the diocese that they're working with. And so I think the key element to this is we need to be intentional with the people we're trying to serve. There's never going to be one program, one system that we're going to be able to plug and just run with. It takes a little bit of a creativity. It takes the desire to build relationships with other people to build this type of marriage ministry. And we're going to get to this in a little bit about what Pope Francis calls the marriage catechumenate. This is the key line that sort of got this whole ball rolling for me. And so I'd been married for 2 years. I was sitting in adoration one day, and this was the line that I read from Amoris Laetitia that got me to want to do something for this for my dissertation. And so he said, nowadays, who is making an effort to strengthen marriages, to help married couples overcome their problems, to assist them in working and raising children, and in general, encourage the stability of the marriage bond? Pope Francis writes this after 50 years of the church basically saying the same thing over and over and over again. We need to do something for marriage. We need to do something to support couples. One of the things that I found fascinating is that even in canon law, it's in canon law that the church is required to have ongoing formation for marriage. But the majority of we just don't have it. We don't have the resources for the systems and structures we've been built in have not been directed to this. We're under the assumption that, you know what, they learned it when they were younger and they can start integrating it. But as we have all known is that we don't know how to put it into practice. We don't know how to take what we've learned in those years from 1st to 8th grade. If you went through high school and Catholic high school, you still do not have that, unless it's taught to you and there's a practice involved. We don't know how to integrate our faith into our lives. The other issue that I have found, and this is what Francis identifies, is that so much of pre-Cana talks about the knowledge of marriage. So the one part is the theology of marriage, right? Guys, you want to know and understand, but because we haven't seen them for decades, we are just dumping all of the theology from Genesis all the way to the wedding of Cana into their minds within a day. A lot of times, and again, with lack of resources and things that we have within diocese, we've had to merge pre-Cana formation into these like 2 weekends or like a marriage encounter. So we lose even the connection to the deep connection to this parish that can continue the accompaniment beyond. And so Francis identifies this as well, that we need to move beyond just the knowledge. The knowledge is important. The theology behind marriage is important. The actual knowledge of the family skills and life, those are important. But we also have to help them live it out, right? So we have to connect it to that human experience. Pope Francis in 2015 comes up with Amoris Laetitia, right? So after the 2 synods on the family, he develops this document called The Joy of Love. And it's a beautiful document. And if you have never read it, I encourage you to read it, especially if you're married, because it's technically supposed to be a letter to couples, right? And this letter of motivation and support and guidance. And there's some beautiful lines in that document. After that document was published, though, it took 5 years to get a strategic plan of how to live it, how to begin to start to implement it in some way. And so we get that in the call to the Joy of Love from the USCCB, which is basically a framework of how formation within marriage should develop. So we first have that remote formation, which is actually the school age, the as kids are developing, how are they hearing about marriage, learning about marriage, being able to start to really discern that vocation. And then you get into the actual proximate as they get closer to like the more pre-Cana, the being able to experience the actual sacrament themselves, and then ongoing. A year later after that, you have what the dicastery for the laity and family life call the catechumenal pathway. And Francis had been talking about this, so it's not actually in Amoris Laetitia, but almost a year after that, at different groups, he has been talking about this idea of this, what is this catechumenal pathway of support for marriage? And his key to this is this idea that this has to be a lifestyle. It can't just be something we're teaching facts about, okay, this is how you do this. It's more of like a mentor and apprenticeship experience. It's a guiding all the way through from youth, even beyond into the sacrament of marriage. There's this support system and at the heart of it, the parish is the guide of this, and that there's something that they're entering into. And so this catechumenal portion is what we're really going to focus on. This idea of how do we enter into, by journeying and walking with the couples into marriage. And he even says, and I agree with them, is that this needs to start even before the engagement, right before the engagement, where you are discerning it. Because after the engagement, the unfortunate thing is you really do not have that much time to discern. Very quick after the engagement, you have to put a pretty hefty down payment, depending on where you're living in the country, on your wedding. And so the process of being able to successfully discern through, okay, is this what we want to do, really has to happen even before they start to get engaged. And so we need to create a process where we can help them discern that engagement process into the prepping for marriage and then beyond. This can seem like a lot. We, again, as I said, we all have 1,000 different jobs that we are doing. We'll talk more about how sometimes we might have to sort of prune certain things so that we can make time for this. But if we do feel like, and if the church keeps saying that this is a priority and one of the top priorities that we need to be focusing on, we have to figure out a way to try to engage in this area. And I think this letter, so this is at the beginning of the catechumenal pathways on married life, Francis concludes with an opening, or begins with an opening letter, but this is the conclusion of that letter. And I think it's super helpful to keep in mind as we are thinking about marriage formation and how do we jump into this? Because it can be fearful. There's not a lot of tools out there. It's a different mindset of this lifelong model of accompaniment rather than just, okay, a school-aged model of formation and running like this adult faith formation or this adult faith formation. What we really have to create is a network of small faith communities that have a desire to support one another and want to see the success of each other's marriages. And so this is what he says. I just want to read this. I know it's a little long, but I think just listen to this as I'm reading it, because I think it's very encouraging. And it says that we need to act. We need to try to do something. So he says, I did not at all shrink from telling you what was for your benefit or from teaching you. I urge all of those who offer pastoral care to families to make these words of the Apostle Paul their own and not to be discouraged in the face of a responsibility which may seem difficult, challenging, or even beyond our means. Be courageous. Let us begin to take the first steps. Let us initiate the process of pastoral renewal. Let us put our minds and hearts at the service of future families. I assure you that the Lord will sustain us and give us wisdom and strength and make our enthusiasm grow. Above all, allow us to experience the delightful and comforting joy of evangelizing as we proclaim the gospel of the family to new generations. I think how we do this is that we have to truly become the bridge between the human experience and faith. I've now run the Endure program in a couple different forms now, the published one and the one I did for my doctorate, for over 100 couples. And what I find is that people want to be met on that road. They're searching, they're looking, especially those newly married couples. There's nothing really out there in society for them to connect to. They definitely are going through the struggles of trying to figure out how to communicate better. What does intimacy look like? How do we sort of comprehend our family of origins with each other? There are these soft skills that need to be cultivated and nurtured a little bit for faith and theology to actually take root. And the only place that happens is us meeting them on the road, making that connection, seeing how either the joys or the struggles of early family life are becoming, or go advance into marriage, like in that 20-year period when their kids are starting to move out and they've spent so much of their time focusing, like that video that we just saw, right? So much of their time's focused on their kids, making them successful. And then in a few days, there's this, oh, they don't need me anymore. I haven't put this time and energy into my spousal relationship. And now my kids are moving away and I'm having more and more time with my spouse, but he or she is a completely different person than the person that I once knew in the beginning of my marriage. And so I think as a church, we can help with this in creating these bridges of meeting them on the road, and then showing them how our faith enhances every skill, these soft skills that we need for successful relationships, for successful family life. And these are just a few of the skills that I have talked to in like the Endure program, but almost every marriage program tries to hit upon, right? Because these are the main ones that we need to be able to do successfully, to have well-formed marriages, right? And so communication, intimacy, forgiveness, and you go down the list. But what I find is each of these can easily be connected to aspects of our faith, right? How do you pray if you don't know how to communicate? If you don't know the love of God, that unconditional love, how can you even talk about intimacy, right? That's got to be the end goal of where we're going. We talk about anger and forgiveness. One of the data points that I found in doing all my research, and it was the most shocking one, was that only 2% of kids see their parents complete the full cycle of forgiveness when they get into an argument. I did a lot of research to unpack that statistic, but the reality is it makes sense. They see the initial argument, the kids go to bed, and then the parents complete the cycle of forgiveness afterwards. They start to realize that they apologize for the thing that they did wrong. They say they're not going to do it again, and then there is that reconciliation that happens, but the kids sometimes don't get to see that. And so we're building semi-skills throughout as we are developing and growing, and then we take them into relationships and we have to try to figure out how to make them work. But we don't have to do that alone. We can try to do that with each other. There's two very hopeful quotes within Emmaus that I wanted to share as well. Is that he says, "I thank God that many families, which are far from considering themselves perfect, live in love, fulfill their calling, and keep moving forward, even if they fall many times along the way. This in his reflection shows us that there is no stereotype of the ideal family, but rather a challenging mosaic made up of different realities with joys, hopes, and problems." I love that image of this challenging mosaic. The divorce rate itself, if you track it within the yearly time, the divorce rate is going lower, right? But also people seeking marriage are also going lower because they see it as an institution that might not bring them happiness. I think it's important to look at this challenging, this image of this challenging mosaic and help couples begin to piece that together. And that's what we're doing as a church. We're being able to show them that they have a place to bring their joys and excitements when they have that new child, or they get that new job, or they celebrate that wedding. But then they also have a place to wrestle with their sufferings, to wrestle with the hardships that they have, and know that they aren't the only ones doing it on their own. And then each of those little parts make up this divine plan that we can't see fully in front of us, but God sees. And then the more we live out that divine plan and get to take a step back, we get to see the beauty of this challenging mosaic that we've participated in. Finally, we have this quote of where he talks about this idea of creating a lifelong project. So he says, joining their lives together, spouses assume an active and creative role in a lifelong project. Their gaze now has to be directed to the future that with the help of God's grace, they are daily called to build. For this very reason, neither spouse can expect the other to be perfect. Each must set aside all illusion and accept the other as he or she actually is, an unfinished product, needing to grow, a work in progress. We all know that if you're married, we are all a work in progress. We're always trying to figure out how we do this a little better. As we develop, I think in my work with couples, one of the things that comes up all the time is that it's said all the time is that they're so different than the person I married. We all are different. I'm different than 8 years ago than I am today. We become different after we become a parent. We become different after we deal with a hardship or even a success that we have. And it's trying to help people see each other. And so like that beautiful phrase you say, right, into me see, right? And so that's how we understand intimacy, is that we need to help couples see their lives as this intimate project that they're working on. And at the heart of that project, where they can go first to unpack it and grow it, is the local parish, right? Is this place where I feel like I can be connected. When I did this the first time, when I did the marriage program the first time for the test subject who did for the dissertation, I had to do a lot of evaluations and surveys, and I'll share a lot of that at the last one, but I want to share one, the last webinar, but I want to share one thing that they said. They said that for the first time ever, I felt like the church was here to support me. And I'll share the exact quote when we get to the third webinar, but it was anonymous. I didn't know who had said it, but they had been trying to engage in some way with parish life. They had been active as youth, but they have never felt like they were actually trying to stay connected, that the church was actually reaching out to them to better their life, that they always had to come to the church to be filled up in some way or stay connected. There was nothing that was practically supporting them. That first time that we ran it, we emailed everyone who got married in the last 5 years in that parish, and this was a little bit of a smaller group that I had to focus on. Now Endure can be used for any age group, but that first time was just for people married within their first 5 years of marriage. And so we emailed about 50 couples. Out of those 50 couples, 24 of them responded, and 17 actually went through the 5-week program that we had created and set up for them. And they, half of those people who were they're under the age of 40, they were in those first 5 years of marriage, had not been back to a wedding, back to a church since their wedding day. And so there's nothing out there for this support in marriage, especially in those first 5 years. If the church becomes this hub of place where we want to support their lived life out in the world, it's going to draw these people in that we have been missing, that we haven't had a place to connect with us. And so this brings us to the actual experience, and we're gonna unpack this more on the second webinar. But I developed with Faith and Family Life Catholic Ministries. They're a group out from California. They create a new version of family faith formation materials, but I had used their program for about 3 years or 2 years, and I loved it so much that I wanted to connect my marriage program to them. I felt like we had the same model, this idea of this marriage catechumenate model of how do we actually walk with people throughout the entirety of life, right? Beginning with family life, where they are pursuing marriage, and then we continue into their young family life and beyond. And so we created it was originally 5, we extended it to a 6-week series. So there's 5 practical sessions that will take place. And so we cover things like communication, intimacy, forgiveness, and anger. We talk about family of origin. And then the 6th session is actually a 4-part series mini retreat that you would do on a Saturday. And that really unpacks the mystery of marriage. So we call that mystagogy, but the mystery of the sacrament. And then sort of unites all of these skills that they've been learning to the faith as a whole. And so throughout, we're connecting the skill of communication, like to prayer, or intimacy to the love of God and that agape type of love. But where I find that it's a slow build, and then the retreat really helps pull it all together, and then helps them develop a plan and connect to a intentional community. The other thing that the program does is it puts couples into small intentional communities with each other, and we'll talk more about that in the second webinar. But what I find is that this is a great on-ramp to building this parish life that I think St. John Paul II really envisioned, which is a parish is meant to be a family of families, right? Families accompany other families. It can't just be anymore it can't just be anymore just the pastor who is trying to run and manage all the things, or the DRE being put in charge of all these different portions. It really takes the entire culture of the parish, seeing themselves as like, I care about this person and this family, and they care about me, and how do we best support each other? A resource that we're in the development of is, so Endure would be one, like a 6-week series. Wellspring is going to be more of a seasonal experience where we're going to have like date nights, and we're going to create tools where you can pull any couple. It doesn't have to be people who've gone through the Endure experience, but it could be any couple. And it would have the same flow as the Endure experience. So it would be some skill or thing that we want to help teach from the social sciences, like a practical thing that's been really helpful, and then connecting that skill to the faith, putting people in community and social time with each other, and then giving them something to go forth with to continue that conversation beyond the parish walls. And so we'll dive into more the both of these programs and in that second webinar. But I really just wanted to provide sort of this overview and sort of like my frame of thinking as I've developed this over time, and found that this is, for me personally, that this, I find that this is one of the most important things that the church can be doing right now. And the only thing that's really, I find in our way, and it has happened to me as well, as so I'm the director of formation. I'm Pastoral Associate at St. Bartholomew's, but I really oversee all of formation, and I get stuck in the nitty gritty of the day-to-day stuff, right? Is trying to run our family faith formation program, trying to make sure confirmation's going. We just finished our first communions. It's all of the things that we have to get these things accomplished. And so this idea of marriage can get pushed to the side. And it's not until we actually get it on the calendar, we try to start building that team, we start pitching it to some of our couples, that anything's ever going to happen. So what I would encourage you to start to just brainstorm and to think about is, how do you take small steps? What are just little things that you can begin to do? Maybe just try to find, okay, do we have all the contact information for the couples in our parish or those who've been married? Most of the times within marriage, pre-Cana, it goes on that piece of paper, it goes into a filing cabinet, and then no one ever sees it again. And so how do we actually come up with an approach where we can start to just subtly start to engage these marriages in some way? Because I guarantee you, if you start at marriage and young family life, you're going to see a whole cultural change within your parish. Right now, what we do is we wait until they're about 7 to 10 years into their family life to actually engage them in any way. And then we wonder why, when they come to us to seek First Communion for their kids, we wonder why we get frustrated when they don't want to be a part of our group. They want to be a part of our community. We weren't there for the most crucial moments of their life of trying to mend that. And I'll leave you with this one last piece, because I think this is it even opened my eyes even more. This year, after we've ran now the Endure program 3 times at the parish, a bunch of the family faith formation couples came up to us and said that this sounds like a great idea and it would have been really helpful for me. But unfortunately, my husband and I split, or were separated, or were divorced. Can we do a divorced and separated group at some point? And so we just started that at St. Bartholomew's. We had about 15 individuals show up to this group. Many of them were part of my family faith formation program. And to listen to their stories, it even more speaks to me that we need to be there in the beginning. One person in particular that jumps out to me, she has a first grader, and she has 2 kids, and she was going, she signed up late. She came in sometimes, sort of disheveled, trying to bring in her kids. And I always wondered what that story was, or what was happening. I never knew that she was separated, and it wasn't on the registration form or anything. And she came to that meeting, and when she said that in August her husband just left, and it was completely blindsided. She had no idea that this was gonna happen. And taking things from our family program, she said that I wish I had this at the beginning, because there were so many little things that if I just had this tool, maybe something might not have happened. And we don't know what would have happened in that situation, but I do know that there would be less separations, less divorces, because that anxiety that we experience and that feeling of being alone at times in those early stages of marriage and family life, they would dissipate. You would have a support system. You would have the proper tools to have a successful relationship. So I'll leave it there, because we'll dive all into like how Endure is broken down, how marriage, and not just Endure itself, but we will have, there are plenty of tools out there, however you would want to do it. we just have to start doing marriage ministry. So we'll try to break that down to like what are best practices that I've seen moving forward.
Thank you, Stephen, for that. So we're going to take a couple minutes, or about 15 minutes or so, with question and answer. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to use the chat or the questions tab. I'll be monitoring this section. So, Stephen, I guess my first question for you is, why now? Why have this conversation right now?
Yeah. Right now, I feel like we've known this for a long time, right? So Mors Laetitia came out in 2015. You have, what I find hilarious is that the USCCB and the dicastery come out with documents in a year of each other.
Right.
And they actually have two different processes, but I think they finally have now figured out how to merge the two processes. But I think the church is
in context only in the last couple of years.
That's right. Yeah. And so it's just been in, right. So we're almost 10 years from Amoris Laetitia, but I feel like the church sees it, and we don't, like I said in the beginning, we don't have to, this shouldn't be anything surprising for any of us, right? We have couples who are that, like, either we're married or we have friends, and we've seen the struggles that can come from family life and marriage, and that we're living in a time where across generations we are in the most lonely epidemic, right? That all the studies are saying it's not just in kids anymore; it's everywhere. And the irony is that we're the most interconnected generation ever, right? Like we can be connected to anybody. But what I find is that we at times can feel that we're in these silos, and the only way to break that silo is authentic, intentional accompaniment that draws them into community. And society doesn't just have that built into it, but the church does. Like, that's been the model of the church forever, right? So the early church would set up these little communities. They didn't have priests there all the time. The community itself had to support each other. And I think we just need to get back into that. And I'm saying this from New Jersey, where we don't want to ever look at anybody. We want to get into the thing that we're going to and get out. And so I think we just have to help build that culture. And the only way that's built is really, it's going to take some time, because it's going to be that intentional, one couple at a time, into these different groups. And we'll get into this idea that how my program works is that we meet with each couple individually first. So
question I had is, why are the more traditional pre-Cana methods, et cetera, techniques not necessarily reaching and working well with like millennials and now Gen Z, for that matter? You had mentioned, basically with Christian Smith, he's talking about like a crisis of every time we try to convert someone in, 10 more people are leaving. And, to your point about marriage prep materials, not having a really statistically significant impact from Catholics to non-Catholics within that 5-year period. Why is it not working?
Yeah. I think the bigger struggle is that because we have such lack of resources and tools, right, we've had to take out the intentionality from marriage almost completely, right? So we move marriage ministry into a diocesan framework where you have 50 couples coming to one event, right? And you go through God's plan for marriage, right? And then you go through the skills day. My wife and I, we did that 9 years ago. And what was hilarious about that is that when we were walking in, my wife told me I could not answer any questions or respond to any answers. So I had to sit there. And so my sitting there was talking to the couple next to us. And this is before I was even thinking about this, but it really, I think about it now, is that the woman turned to me and said, "Do you mind if I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure, not a problem." She's like, "Are you guys living together?" And we were not at the time. She was living in Pennsylvania. I was here. And I said, "No, we're going to probably move in afterwards." She's finishing up in her nursing degree. And she goes, "Well, so we lied to our priests. We thought, like, my mom wants us to get married in the church, but like we didn't want like that to ruin it. So we just lied to it." And then the man said some things that I can't repeat now about the church getting into his privacy. And I just thought it was funny, because like we're sitting there listening to the God's plan for marriage, and this is the thing that the couple is thinking about. And so we went through a whole conversation. At the very end, I said, I got to be transparent with you. I actually work for a church. And the guy's face got like red, like beet red. And I was like, you got to be honest with the priest, though. We can't serve you if we don't know your story, right? If we don't know how to best accompany you. And so I find that we can create a cookie cutter idea of, okay, this is what marriage should be, but we don't get down into the nitty gritty of it. And you can do as much as you want in preparation, but the reality is once you get into the experience and trying to merge lives together and you get in that first argument, all that goes out the door and you're just like, okay, what do I do? And so I think the more we can pull back that intentionality, it's like, that's why like programs like, I think, Witness to Love and these other ones that are creating networks of accompaniment, where it's not just us hoping they come back and they feel accompanied. It's like there's actually connected to mentors, or they're connected to individuals that are supporting the growth of their marriage is what's necessary. And then we just have to consciously put more resources into it. We just don't put a lot of money or energy into it. So
this was a comment that someone had brought up, and so I'm just going to frame it in a question. How does this sort of like marriage prep, marriage accompaniment fit into the wider scheme of vocation discussions? You know, especially around, because we're talking about people who have chosen a path in life, but how does this fit into the wider conversation of sort of discernment and vocational awareness in general?
Yeah. I think it's at the heart of it. So we actually just created a vocations committee that all of these things funnel through. And so it's not just, because one of the things that drove me crazy growing up is that when we talk about vocations, and especially when they have the general intercessions, most of the time they leave marriage out of the thing. Like it's always, and we need holy priests. Like, yes, we
priesthood
do.
and religious life is usually
but the reality is right, where do holy priests and holy religious come from? They come from holy families, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we need all three. All three need to be operating together. And so we created, so Father Matthew at our parish, this is his like number one thing that he's been pushing for the last 2 years he's been there. And it's this, we call it Called by Named, but it's a whole ministry on vocations, because each of us has a call. And I think the more we can integrate, and that's why that preparation that we are giving to kids as they're developing and growing in tandem with their families while they're in those moments is so key to reemphasize this idea of being called. And what does vocation look like as it's developing? Because if we don't understand how to answer the call throughout life, and like that, get these tools of discernment, like I didn't get tools of discernment until I got to college, and I got put with people who helped me process these big decisions that we were making. How do we integrate some of those tools and those skills at a younger age with people? I think is key.
Yeah, and just to add my own 2 cents, I think often about this idea that, to your point, like if we want to promote proper or very good, wholesome Catholic families, they need to be, the parents obviously are an important part of that aspect. And if we want to have healthy, holy priests and religious, often the biggest supporters, if the parents are supporting their children in the discerning whatever vocational role they have much better outcomes. Various CARA and other studies have proven this point out too, that, priests and religious have much better outcomes if they're supported by their families.
That's it, yeah. And the most recent one that just came out, the survey they did on all the seminarians, the number one point is that I think it was 90-something% of them all came from intact, practicing faith-filled families, right? So that we lose sight on that if we do focus this time on marriage and making sure that they're strong and secure, they feel comfortable, then we teach them. And so we'll talk about this the next webinar, but we do a couple, we call it the couple prayer, but we build on the great tradition we have in praying with each other, or we build on the beautiful tradition of our faith and what we've learned in prayer with the couples as we go through, because most people don't know how to pray on their own, let alone try to pray with another human being, right? And so especially so intimately with a spouse. And so how do you help guide them to that is key. And so what I find is it's a lot of this incarnational aspects of our faith that we miss in the forming process. Like, how do we actually show them how to put that stuff into practice? Because you can know the knowledge, but then how do you actually put it into practice? And I think as a whole, how we're framing catechetical tools is about to change, like how we're looking at marriage as a whole is about. So there's a lot of potential and things sort of building up. I think the hardest part is going to be re-looking at structures, right? Because we've been doing them for decades, right? And so how do you remove yourself from the structure you're in now and think of something a little differently and try something new?
This actually leads to a question I had. Like, how do we properly encourage good formation in couples? Like, what are some of the institutional roadblocks that can be problematic for couples to find community within the church?
Yeah. I think initially is most places just don't have the actual meetings. Like, they'll have adult faith formation here, or maybe they'll do a marriage encounter at some point. But a lot of the stuff we do for marriage is disconnected from parish life as a whole. Mm-hmm. And so how do you make that connection? I think an easy way, even if it's not like a Witness to Love program, but if you can integrate mentorship into the pre-cana process, where they're meeting with a couple to just get some feedback, to get some ideas of what what it was like for them going through the process. What are some hurdles that they've got in life? And what I find is that those mentors who help out with the pre-cana process, it's enriching their marriage as they're going through it, right? Because they're revisiting these skills. They're talking about some of these challenges and the joys of their early married life. And we don't just naturally get that. And so the system gets built onto it once it's initiated and put into practice. The hard part is, I find, is that some people that they just want to get through the process, right? They want to, they got the date for the wedding and they just got to get through this thing. And so we lose some marriages at time, or people seeking marriage, because we tell them they're going to go through this like 4 or 5 series of meetings with this mentor couple / with some additional meetings with the priest as well.
One question I sort of had, and okay, Jennifer from the chat had a question. So her comment first is, our parish does pre-cana at the parish with our priests and engaged sponsored couple ministry mentorship. However, the couples still have to take part in the diocesan one-day marriage encounter. Many dioceses are having all pre-cana at the parish level. Are you finding that it's better for couples in the community to be connected to parish life?
Yeah, I would say that it's much better for them to be connected to parish life, or even if we can make it even if we can make it on like a deanery type level, where it's more easily accessible to pull those people back with each other. Everyone's yearning for community and trying, especially in those moments, they want to be connected to these people. I have never seen or talked to any of the people. There's about 50 something couples when I went through pre-cana. I've not talked to a single one of them since I went through pre-cana, right? So that intentionality and that accompaniment is not there. And so what I find it becomes a little bit more effective is if you can't do it on a parish level, maybe on a deanery level, where you pull, and it doesn't even have to be your deanery. It could be a series of parishes that come together. And so that was the goal that we did this year. We're in 2 separate deaneries, I think, but we were connecting to other parishes, and we ran that indoor program because it doesn't have to fall on just one parish. So we can create a network of that, and then you have all of these married couples who are working with each other. So I think it's just thinking a little bit outside the box of, instead of just, there's a lot of time, and I don't want to take away from the amount of time and energy that goes into those who present those God's plan for a joyful marriage, and then those skills building and those couples we get to volunteer to go do those things. I just find that it's hard to have that intentionality in those meetings because you don't know their story. You don't know what's landing, what's not landing. There's no follow-up with them afterwards. The priest is supposed to be doing that follow-up, but then they also don't know what's actually being said at the meeting. So it becomes a challenge. If you can make it more localized, I think it'd be more effective. Well,
and also, you're catching people at such a variety of points in their couples experiences, just a faith journey. And so when you try to do like a catch-all, sometimes it just doesn't, fit super well, in that sense. I guess because we're almost out of time, one final question I had was, or not quite final, but what's Valerie had brought this up. Can you share some fruit the parishes are seeing post-Endure?
Yeah, definitely. So
and this will serve as sort of like a teaser for the next
yeah, that'll be a great way to conclude it. So I've had some amazing ones. We had the one of the things that I was hoping would happen, I just didn't know if it was going to happen or not, is that all of the little small groups that we put together who've gone through this, they just naturally stick together afterwards, and they go and they do like date nights together, and they just have this ongoing support, because that we put this intentional faith community together. What I find is that over time that will dwindle, right? And so the first one I did was almost 5 years ago, and so without a point of contact to draw them back, it only lasts for so long. It'll last for as long as they want it to last, but then life gets in the way. New kids come in, and it becomes more of a challenge. But if there is the hub of the parish or the deanery where they can be pulled back to, those groups stay pretty active and they stay connected. My favorite one, and I share this all the time, and I still don't know where the end of it's going to be, is that I had one couple come up to me and ask that they wanted to participate, but the husband wasn't Catholic. It wasn't anything religious at all. And I said, that's not a problem. Like, you can come, and then we can try and I'll try my best to make you feel as comfortable as possible. But know that we are going to do things. We're going to do the couple prayer. We're going to be talking about aspects of the faith. But I'll check in with you and I'll see how it goes. And so when we first met, we did our first visit, and he said, I'm not doing any of the massing, and I'm not doing any of the praying. Like that's how he entered the whole thing. And so we went through it. I would check in with him after each session. He would say, oh no, this is fine. This is great. This is really helpful. It ends, and how we conclude and door is with a little marital blessing in our Saturday mass at the end of the retreat. And I get up there late. I get in the pew. I look to my right, and there he is sitting there with his wife. And I'm like, what is he doing here? And so at the end of the mass, I was like, why did you come to the mass? And he was like, I don't know what I believe about all this stuff, but I know this would have made my wife happy, so I wanted to be here. I was like, awesome. I was like, that sounds great. Fast forward a year from there, I get a call from him saying, this has been really awesome. We've been meeting up on a every other month basis with our little group, and it's been so helpful for us in our marriage. Can I be the head of hospitality for the next group that came in? And so for the next 6 sessions, he came in, set up, welcomed all the people that come in, and he had spent more time in his church in the last year with me doing all these things than he had almost his entire life. And it's stuff like that, and it's one simple thing. That's like one person, but that's what we need to be doing, right? It's that type of intentionality that draws them in. I've had a number of people come up and say how much this has transformed their marriages. And we'll get more into that the next time, but there's a ton of just little skills that if we had them, and then faith-based stuff that if we understood, like we don't struggle, or that in these struggles that there is this unending hope that we have that we can fall into, that it really helps them. The group out in they'll talk about this themselves, but the group out in California, one of their participants, they're finishing up their retreat this Sunday. One of their participants owns a restaurant. They didn't know that he is catering the entirety of the meal and wants to support ongoing marriage ministry events at the parish because they did this. So what I love about this is that it becomes something that is self-developing. Like if you invest in these people, they're going to invest back into the parish because they find it as a home, they find it something beneficial, and that is what a parish is meant to be. So.
Absolutely. I think that's a great spot to end on. And so I want to say thank you for Dr. Stephen, for presenting, and thank you to everyone who tuned in and joined us today. We'll have a recording of this webinar uploaded to our YouTube channel in the next week. So keep an eye out there and on our website, CatholicApostlesCenter.org for the link. You're welcome to share with anyone you like. And as always, all of our content is free to share. If you haven't yet found us on social media, please like and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, in the hopes that we'll continue to reach people with spreading the message of the gospel. One thing of note, this webinar is the first of 3 parts with Dr. Stephen on marriage accompaniment. June 10th has our next one. entitled Trends in Formation for Couples and Strategies to Achieve Lifelong Marriages. That'll be on June 10th at 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. You've probably seen a couple of our links, so I'm going to send it actually just one more time. Also, because of the timing of this webinar, I wanted to mention that on May 29th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, Center Founding Director, Father Frank Donio, Palatine SAC, will be doing a webinar on disaffiliation, belonging, and belief using various materials from Springtide Research, as well as sort of a dovetailing in Dr. Stephen's conversation about this question of community and disaffiliation amongst young people, specifically young adults. So that one is also available, free to register. Please share that as well. And with anything else, I hope you have a good and blessed day. Thank you, Dr. Stephen.
Thanks, John. And you can share my contact information. I think Christine had asked for it, so I'll send you that, and you can send it along. I'd be happy to chat with anybody. So,
okay. And with that, wish you all a very good day.
Thanks, guys. Bye.